Hey, this is Sanyam Bhutani, and you're listening to Chai Time Data Science, a podcast for data science enthusiasts where I interview practitioners, researchers, and Kagglers about their journey, experience, and talk all things about data science. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Chai Time Data Science Show. In this episode, I interview Andrew Shaw, a Fastai student and creator of MusicAutobot, which is an AI-powered pop music generator. Andrew has a background in computer science, iOS, and software development, and we talk all about his background and his journey into the field of machine learning and his journey as a Fastai student. We also talk all about MusicAutobot. You should definitely check out the website, which is MusicAutobot.com. We talk about the idea, the efforts, and the tech behind it. We also discuss Andrew's journey as a Fastai student and the Fastai DAWNBench result. You can find a link to the original FastAI DAWNBench blog post in the description of this podcast. This is going to be a NLP/Transformer release week for the podcast. On Sunday, which will be the next release, I'll be releasing the interview with the CTO of Hugging Face, and we'll be talking even more about Transformers and NLP. So stay tuned for that. For now, here's my interview with Andrew Shaw. Please enjoy the show. I'm on the call with Andrew Shaw. Hello, Andrew. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
Thanks, Sanyam. Thanks for having me.
So before we talk all about how you'll be putting EDM producers out of their jobs pretty soon, could you tell us how did you get interested in machine learning and when did you decide to start your journey in this field?
Yeah, so it started around 2 years ago. I left my job at Yahoo and I was just a little bit burnt out. I was doing iPhone development for around 6 years and I was trying to think about what would be like the next cool thing to work on and just like do a little side projects. And at the time, the two big things were like deep learning and crypto. Yeah. And so I was just taking watching a bunch of videos and a bunch of classes on them. And as soon as I came across the Fast AI video, I was like, oh, this is it. I know between crypto and machine learning, machine learning is amazing. Like the stuff that you can do from the top down. And so I got super focused on just taking all those classes from Fast AI. And from then I was pretty hooked on this path.
Got it.
And 2 years later, I guess I'm still on this path. So it's, I got sucked into it. Yeah.
Interesting. So Fast AI was your first course that you signed up for, or did you like juggle around with other courses as well?
I think quite a few. So the other one I think is Andrew Ning's machine learning course. That was the initial one that I took. Yeah. And then Fast AI, I think there were still a few. There's a self-driving course on, I think, Coursera that I also took for like 1 semester.
Is it on Coursera or the Udacity one? Are you talking?
Oh, sorry, Udacity. Yes. Okay, yeah. I get mixed up between all the videos that I've been taking, but yeah. So I was taking quite a few kind of deep learning and classes, and it helped me generalize kind of the theory and the basics for me.
Got it. So you've also been a huge and active member and contributor to the FastAI projects and the community as well. The other project that you've been a major contributor to is, and this was titled as How to Train Your ImageNet Model Under 18 Minutes. So the project where the FastAI collaboration happened to set the ImageNet speed record for training on public infrastructure. That's the title of the project. And now with MusicAutobot. So could you also tell us a bit more about your FastAI journey?
Oh yeah, for sure. So I feel incredibly lucky to be on this like Fast AI journey. So after taking that first class, I actually realized this part 2 was happening in San Francisco and a block away from where I was.
Okay.
So I was like, yeah, I might as well just drop in and go and take the class in person. And so being able to take the class in person, I think what's really amazing about Fast AI is actually the community. So the online forums, everyone there is just learning how to learn. It's just in the same boat. So everyone's just incredibly helpful. And so even being in person, seeing how Jeremy works, and I think part of that ImageNet competition was through that class in person. Jeremy was like, does anyone want to enter this competition and see if we can beat out all these companies like Google and Intel? And then a couple of us naive students are like, yeah, let's do it. I think we have a chance. and luckily we actually got like incredible results and surprising a bunch of people with much less resources. So that's kind of the story. And then that's actually, it was like really inspiring to be able to do something and then without like a PhD background or a bunch of a huge research team and huge resources. And that's kind of what made me believe that it's possible to kind of work in this deep learning field.
Got it. Have you followed the recent courses as well? So given your iOS background, and to the audience, I'd also like to mention that you built some amazing apps. One also got the best productivity app award by Lifehacker, I think. So are you also are you also excited about the Swift for TensorFlow scene that's going on and all that stuff?
I'm super excited, but to be honest, I actually haven't watched the most recent lectures on combining Swift, and I was kind of heads down on this music project. So that's something I've been meaning to go back to and actually learn, and it would be amazing to actually
Would love to see some more projects in that zone from you, but we'll just talk about the music one in a bit. Could you tell us more about, so I constantly talk about this theme. Shout out to an episode with Robert Bracco. He's a contributor to an unofficial port of Fastai audio, but it's about learning to learn. And because with Fastai, it's sort of this open-ended question. How do you follow the material best and how do you take the material for yourself? So could you maybe tell us how did you approach the material and maybe how did you refactor your approach as you went on with it?
I see. Yeah, I think everyone has different styles of learning. And for me, I found out what worked best is, another class I actually, I think this one is on Coursera that I had watched was like learning how to learn. And that class, they talk about this thing like focused learning and diffuse learning. And so for me, taking the Fast AI course, what worked best for me was actually just going through all the lectures really fast at once. And I know people say to stop and then really kind of try to understand what's going on. But for me, it helped to just kind of get this general idea. And then actually from there, if there's anything that inspired me, I would go deep into focus onto whether it was like, I think one project I did was style transfer. So arbitrary style transfer. And that was one lecture in Fast AI. And so I wanted to take this code that was in TensorFlow and convert it into PyTorch. So all along, I tried to look at different projects that I might be inspired on doing. But I kind of briefly just try to do all the lectures as fast as I can before I before I would kind of lose interest.
You first completed all of the watched the complete videos and then went back to replicating the lesson code?
Yes, exactly. So I'll go through them very fast, and then if there's parts in NLP or computer vision that I was interested in on different research, I would go back into.
Makes sense. Got it. So now shifting gears to your recent project, MusicAutobot, could you give us an understanding of what's the challenging aspect here and what is MusicAutobot all about?
Yeah. So the general idea for MusicAutobot is actually just a tool to help, I guess, producers or anyone just trying to compose music. And this was kind of a tool I created for myself because I actually just also started getting into music production, and it was just
interesting.
How do I use AI to help assist me to kind of build some cool melodies? And so the general idea of MusicAutobot is that we're combining a few of like the recent advances in NLP, and we do it in a kind of a clever way so that you can, if you have melody, we can translate that into chords. Or if you just have a few notes, we can kind of auto-complete that idea. or if you already have an existing song, we can remix that song into a different beat or just change a few notes that you don't like. And so when it comes down to the challenging aspects, I think the most challenging is probably collecting the data set and formatting that. And then like once you can do that, it's actually a drop-in. It's like really easy to just use the fast AI code that trains a language model and then just apply it completely to music. And then after that, of course, there's a few like tweaks you can do and optimizations for music. But in general, it's just data collection and then just applying fast AI language models to it.
Interesting. So once you came up with the idea, could you maybe tell us like how did you find the next steps of how do you tackle this problem, and maybe like how did you find the ideas to explore?
Yeah. So I think the first, probably the way I structure most of my projects is just try to get a really good baseline going. So once I have an idea, which is let's try to apply transformers to music. And then going from that, it's just how do I get something working as fast as possible, which is what I learned from Fast AI. Just try to get something, and then from the top down, it doesn't matter if you're copying someone else's project or someone's code. So for me, there's quite a few projects out there that are taking music data and then training AI on it, and whether it's like RNNs or other transformers. And so basically what I did was I took existing projects and I kind of modified it to the things that I would like to do. Yeah.
Okay. So I think the project has been under the wraps for 5-6 months, I think. And could you tell us like what went on behind the curtains during that period? What was the prototyping experience like, and what all ideas did you iterate upon?
Yeah, it's been quite a while. And my Git history is all there. And yeah, I wasn't sure when releasing it, I should just keep it all there. But I think it's important to see that this project took a long time, and then for other people to see the whole process. And so for me, I don't have much music background. So this was something I thought was super cool. So in the meantime, I was learning kind of music theory and then production on the meantime, and then also learning how transformers work. So before I knew I knew a little bit more about computer vision when we were doing that competition. And so all this was a little bit new to me. And it was, so those probably 5-6 months were a lot of switching between learning a little bit about music, learning a little bit about transformers. And every time I got stuck, I would just switch over to learning about either switching between learning music and learning deep learning. So
got it. I was going through the code base, and I think it's somewhere around just 2,500 lines of code. Could you so on the GitHub page, I'll have that linked in the description as well. Could you walk us through the code base? What all is in there? I think you've also created a library, which again is MusicAutobot.
Yes. So this, I didn't realize there's 2,500 lines of code. I guess it kind of just grew that way. I'm sure there's a lot I can clean up, but the library is basically a glue between a Python framework called Music21, which is dealing with music data and then being able to kind of manipulate it in a way so that you can train deep learning models on. And then so the two main libraries I used were Music21 and Fast AI. So this whole library is kind of a glue between those two to get things to work well together. So yeah, as mentioned earlier, the hardest part, I would probably say 80% of the data of the lines of code is around data formatting and data encoding. And then the other 20% is probably these models that I've combined together and for training music.
Got it. So Music21 comes into the picture of dataset handling. Could you tell us where does Fastai come into the picture for this? So how do you use Fastai in the project?
So I use Fast AI for basically all of the training that I do. So once I have the data set ready, I've used most of Fast AI, the same code to train a language model. I've used to train a music model. And the only difference is I've changed a lot of things are pretty custom within Fast AI, but Fast AI makes things incredibly easy to customize. So the callback systems, you can kind of tell it to, we're handling music data. So for data augmentations within music, instead, what this is you're basically transposing the song from the key of C to like the key of E. And that way you can multiply your data set. And there's a few other things that I've used FastAI for. The biggest thing is the training loop, but also for parallelization across multiple CPUs.
Okay. So you'd already worked on the ImageNet competition. Do you think your quote-unquote fast AI experience was helpful from there?
I think so. I think it was very helpful for this project. The way to structure, I guess the way to structure the project for me was first just kind of getting a pretty good baseline. And then the second part was actually just keeping really, I think it's more getting a lot of logs and then and keeping track of all your experiments. So I probably have maybe more than 100 notebooks where I have all the logs of all my experiments, and maybe sometimes it's just one line of change so that I can kind of go back and take a look at it. So doing a competition is a little bit different from doing your own project from the ground up, but there's a lot of things that transfer over.
Okay. Now going back to the dataset collection part, could you maybe walk us through what the pipeline looked like, and did you look into the legal copyright aspects of it as well? Because you also created a Chainsmokers remix, and now when I upload my video to YouTube, I'm always afraid of putting these songs into the video. So did you go through that as well?
Yeah. So a lot of the data, I'm not sure if I should mention this, but it was actually scraped from some websites. So a lot of the music files were scraped from these sites that host MIDI files for free. And my basic understanding was that I think it's more okay to train on, but then not releasing the data set publicly. And this is after I went back, and when I was thinking about releasing the model, I went and talked to these companies that I actually, I took a lot of data from. And then they said, yeah, it's actually totally fine. It happens. Okay. Well, it does happen sometimes for academic sets. And so as long as you don't release any of that and you keep it super secure, it's okay to train your models on that. Just don't release any of that data. And so at least for me, I've only just released the model, and then all the songs that I have are actually a slight variations of the actual song, and only within like maybe 10 seconds, a 10-second clip of the actual song.
So you now, let's say you have the data in place. Maybe if you could walk us through the pipeline of the project. So I know it's pretty technical, so we'll have all of the 4 blog posts written by you linked in the description. But if you could give us a high-level overview of what's going on in the project.
Yeah, starting from the top. So it's this web app, and that is all built in Vue, and it's a static front end that I've hosted on GitHub pages. And all that really does is it talks to our API server, which hosts a pre-trained model that I've built on using all the music data. And that API in the backend is hosted on AWS and and it's using Flask. So it's basically receiving a request. So as soon as you click generate, we send that music file from the front end to our back end, and then we start predicting from there.
Got it. And then how was the model trained upon? If you could walk us through that pipeline as well. So you have the trained model put up in the Flask web app, but how was that actually trained upon?
So that model was trained separately, and in general, I used a Jupyter notebook, and within the project, you can see the notebook, how I went through the steps to train. But the first step is just formatting all the data and saving that. And then I used FastAI's training code, like one cycle learning, and a few other ones. So mostly just Fastai AI's training code to train the model. And then for the prediction part, that was the part where most of the modifications came to be able to predict music notes instead of text.
Gotcha. So the main meat of the problem lies in the data set and then generating the music.
Yes.
Got it. Now, you also worked on a few recent architectures to code Bert and Transformal XL along with Seek to Seek, which is an older model. If you could help us understand, how did you went ahead and researched about these, and how did you end up implementing them? Because I don't think Fastai has an inbuilt implementation of these.
Oh, yes. So that part was combining Bert, Transformer, and Seek to Seek. So the reason I did that for music was that instead of just taking a few notes and then auto-completing that idea, with Bert, you can erase a few notes and then you can have the Bert model predict those notes. And so that's kind of like a little bit of a remix. And then for sequence to sequence, that sequence to sequence is usually used for translation. And so what I used that model for was, if you have chords, you can translate it to melody, or if you have melody, you can translate it to chords. And those models were actually something I had been playing around with separately. So when I was working on the Transformer XL code, Bert came out with these incredible results. And I was like, I want to try Bert, see if it works for music. And so I had all these things separately. And the idea around combining them came out when I saw this paper called Unified LM by Microsoft. And the idea behind that was being able to combine Bert and the Transformer XL. So for Bert, you have the bidirectionality, which helps with the context, but they're also super slow to train because you're only training on maybe 15% of the tokens. And so the idea behind Unified LM was to combine those both and get the benefits of bidirectionality of Bert and the fast training of the Transformer. And
Got it.
so I read just the summary and I was like, oh, this is super awesome. I'm going to go implement it. And it turns out it didn't do exactly as I thought. It was actually even slower in training. It didn't exactly combine the Transformer in the way that I thought it was. And so the idea of combining these three came from that was when that paper didn't solve exactly what I was thinking of, I was like, well, if I wanted to solve my problem, how would that work? And eventually I so it was just that idea of combining both Transformer and Bert, where I built on top of it and then combine it in a way where we use translation and masking and forward prediction.
Interesting. I'm curious how much of GPUs went into this project, what all hardware went into creating MusicAutobot?
How much hardware went into this?
Yeah, how much hardware? How many graphic cards?
So the training, in the end, I'm using 8 V100s. And it takes about maybe 36 hours to train the whole model. So yeah, I'm using quite a bit of compute power to train this. And that's a lot because I have quite a bit of data, but you can probably shorten it.
But again, the results are pretty promising, so it's definitely worth it.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I'm actually just training, I think a comparison, I'm training GPT-2 small. So if I would train a larger model, I'm sure it would take maybe double, triple the time of that.
Interesting.
Yeah. So there's still a lot of improvements that I can do on this model. I just don't have as much resources.
Gotcha. Now, I really love how the website functions. So for the listeners, please go to MusicAutobot.com. Do check it out. But it works as as Jeremy always mentions, with keeping a human in the loop along with the AI. So was that intentional, and what are your thoughts around that? Do you think this will also enable producers to maybe be more productive, maybe in a version 2?
I hope so. So actually this last weekend, when I posted my project online, someone reached out on Twitter saying that I would love to try to make a song with AI assisted. And so this past weekend, we spent basically trying to do that. And the results, we were able to get one verse out of it, but we weren't able to kind of complete a whole song. And that was always the idea of this, was that I didn't want to focus more on the performance side of generating something that you can listen to continuously. But for me, it was mostly focusing on pop music and building something that to help producers. And I think that's where the state AI is at right now, is that maybe chatbots are not quite there yet, like fully replacing humans. But I think it's great for something, maybe it's like autocomplete or helping you kind of change the style of your story. And I think there's a huge area in AI assistance right now.
So, and you've been pretty honest in your write-up as well that the fifth generation sounded pretty good for the Roses remix. In my experience, it was somewhere around the same number. So how I look at it is maybe like allowing a human to just throw some ideas at the model and see what it gives back to, maybe just have a partner to bounce ideas off as a producer.
I think so. And I think, at least as humans, it's like incredibly easy to listen to something and realize, hey, that doesn't sound right. But when it comes down to actually writing something from scratch, it's a little bit harder, and it takes a little bit more kind of mental power to write something from scratch. And so for this, it would be mostly, just generating ideas. And some of them sound pretty bad, but also some of them are just like out there where you can be like, oh, that might work, and I'll just change a few notes. And so that's kind of the whole idea behind it.
Got it. So coming to the part where this can be improved upon. So for someone who's maybe trying to improve upon this or trying to reach out to help to you, what suggestions you have? Where should they start, or any ideas that you have?
Yeah, within the whole music area, I think there's a lot of areas to improve on. One is also just generating the actual sound. So right now I'm only using music notes, but if you can generate the actual sound in maybe using different instruments or in a different style, that's one way to kind of improve on this idea to provide inspiration for music producers. And as for other features, I think one thing that could also improve is that, as you said earlier, like maybe 1 out of 5 or maybe like 1 out of 10 things like sound okay. And to build like a music critic on top of that. So before, instead of us having to filter out all the good and bad songs, we can have a music critic that can maybe filter out half of the songs, that can decide, hey, this sounds like something that we trained on, or this doesn't sound like anything, it's just a little bit too random.
Makes sense. But again, the challenging aspect is, to a human, it's pretty easy to say that sounds like trash, but creating a critic that can actually correctly classify that would again be a challenge in itself, I assume.
Oh yes, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So
now,
please go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, I was going to say, especially a critic that is just designed for any person's taste. So what I think is good, the critic might not think is good. So having that, to tune it is also very hard.
Definitely. Now, zooming out a bit, so there's always this question of, should I end my project or should I continue exploring, because nothing works until it does in machine learning. I'm sure many of your projects might have failed when you were building this project. So where did you draw the line of, do you want to continue exploring upon the idea, or do you want to maybe switch to another idea?
Yeah, that happened a lot. And I took maybe like 5 or 6 months on this project. And it was basically just deep diving into trying to make it work. And for me, I would try to go as far as possible. And then until I ran out of ideas on how to make it work. And it was mostly, if there weren't any more low-hanging fruit left, then I was like, it's probably time to move on. And so that's kind of how I decided to switch over. And for me, it was pretty easy because I was doing a cross intersection between music and deep learning. It was a little bit easy for me to switch every time I got stuck. And then if I got inspired again, I would go back and try out a different idea that I had.
Got it. um, maybe zooming out to a general advice, what advice do you have or suggestion do you have for people who don't have their passion project yet, or maybe their app idea yet?
Yeah, for me, it's always a little bit about exploring. So I didn't have this idea from the beginning, but it was in the meantime when I don't have an idea, it was learning. So taking the Fast AI courses, or learning a little bit more about deep learning research that's going on now. So maybe it was like blog posts about recent advances in papers. And then so when I didn't have my own passion project, it was just kind of building up to when that idea came, I would be able to implement it and not be frustrated about how much longer it took, or all the other things I needed to learn before that. And that's kind of the way I went about it. Is like, if you don't have a project yet, it's just kind of do a little bit exploring and then do a little bit of learning. And then once that idea comes, it's just go super focused on that project and see what you can do with it.
It's, in my opinion, it's also about chasing the idea for quite a while, because things usually don't work initially, maybe for quite a while, until they start to show some promise.
Oh yeah, it's incredibly frustrating sometimes, where things don't work or things don't turn out the way you expect it to. And I think part of the journey is just it helps. It really helps if it's something that you really care about, or something that you think is really cool. And if it's something that you don't, then it's really hard to pull through. And so there's a lot of projects I have that are just completely failed, and I've abandoned because I just didn't feel the work was worth it to put into it.
Now, you attended the FastAI course in person. I want to ask you, what advice do you have for someone who's just maybe MOOC educated and trying to get a break into the field? So any best suggestions for a MOOC educated person searching for jobs in the field?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm actually in that same boat. So I'm a MOOC educated person, and I'm also right now trying to get into that field. So just take this all with a grain of salt, because right now I'm still doing this on the side. And I think my biggest advice is that for me, it helps a lot to just do this more with something that you're very super interested in. And I think I was incredibly lucky to be able to do this full time. But for people who have jobs or other commitments, and they're learning this, the idea is it takes a ton of time and a ton of patience.
Okay.
And so just not to be frustrated. And if you get frustrated, don't fault yourself, and you can take a break and come back. And these things, I think a lot of people in this are like PhDs, and they took 5 years. So kind of the thought that I should be able to do this in a year, that can kind of be very demotivating if you don't feel like you're measured up against them. So I think for me, it's just kind of take your time and do things that because you really are very interested in it, and it helps a lot to not get burned out super easily.
That's great advice. Before we conclude the call, what would be your best advice to people who are just starting their journey in deep learning? Any best advices, and how not to get intimidated by all the amazing work that's going on in the field?
Yeah, it's really hard to just get sidetracked, me like, oh, this is so amazing, maybe I should try that.
Yeah.
But just starting out, I feel like I was the same way, and maybe joining like a Fast AI community where everyone is in the same boat and everyone's doing incredibly cool stuff, but they're also talking about the things they didn't understand, and other people are frustrated too about maybe how long it takes. And having that community is really great, because it helps push you along, and then everyone can learn at the same time. And for me, I think having that, that's kind of what kept me motivated for these past couple of years.
Just out of curiosity, so I've always taken the course online, and you've taken it both offline and in person as well, in person and online as well. Sorry. Did you find any difference, or do you feel it's honestly the same experience for both the categories?
So online and in person, I think the lectures that when you're watching, I think it's pretty similar. And I think the difference for me was that Jeremy does these study groups in San Francisco, and then being able to attend those study groups, that was probably the biggest help for me, to being able to see how Jeremy prepares the lectures and how he works. That alone was really good. But I believe whether you're online or in person, you can get a very good experience. The other person, I think it's Sylvain, who was purely online, and then he was really active in the forums, and I think he's gotten just as good experience, or if not better than anyone who was just in there in person and being able to see how everyone works.
That's a great point. So thank you for the amazing conversation. Before we end the call, what would be the best platforms to follow your work and maybe your next amazing project whenever that will come out?
Oh yeah. So probably the best platform is just MusicAutobot.com, and that's where the project is released, and any updates on that area I'll be putting up there.
Gotcha. And how about your personal profiles? Any profiles that you want to mention?
My personal profile, probably hit me up on Twitter. It's Bert Pelican, and so BEARPELICAN. And then message me with any ideas, and that's where I'll be posting any updates.
Awesome. All right, Andrew, thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview, and thanks a lot for creating the future AI to replace EDM producers.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed the show, please be sure to give it a review, or feel free to shoot me a message. You can find all of the social media links in the description. If you like the show, please subscribe and tune in each week to Chai Time Data Science.